149th birthday to
Happy
our
No King's Day.
fantastic country. It is No
We have our
King's
No
Day.
King T-shirts on.
Yes, we do.
What's
I've worn
yours?
this before. Pro-American, anti-liberal.
Okay,
So-
mine is
Oh,
the
you've
Betsy
got-
Ross flag
Nice.
shirt. Remember when there was the big deal about Betsy Ross and like
Yeah, what was that?
people were like, "Oh, we can't use Betsy Ross's flag." I don't know. I
Why?
think somebody called Betsy Ross racist or something at one
What?
point, and so,
So
suddenly this flag
Okay.
was and
Is
so
racist.
Rush Limbaugh stepped up.
Oh, I
and
remember that. Yes.
Yeah, Rush Limbaugh
Yeah.
stepped up and made this T-shirt, and I bought one of the T-shirts back then because I
Nice.
like the Betsy Ross flag. So I'm
I used
the
to listen
original
to Rush every
13
day.
here, dude.
Yeah, nice.
All right, well,
So,
welcome to Barrett and Baxa, everybody.
Yes,
this is
sir.
just Bob and
this
Steve
is not
talking.
media schmedia. This is
There's
just
no
us.
media schmedia today,
No.
even though we might touch on some of it. So,
Well, obviously, the thing that's on everyone's mind right now is that the big, beautiful bill just passed.
Triple
and
B.
Watching the Democrats lose their minds. I mean, the Democrat playbook is to just lie. They just blatantly lie. Like, they'll just be like, in this bill, it makes it illegal to eat breakfast before 7 a.m. So I hope you're
you
fine
like
with
eating
having-
breakfast late in
I
the
hope you
day
don't like,
because
you just screwed yourself, stupid Republicans. Now you can't eat breakfast until after 7 a.m. It's right in the bill. Like, what is wrong with you people? Like, they just come out with actual lies.
Yeah.
So,
But
no one
we-
is losing Medicaid except for people that should not have been on Medicaid. Like, what is hard to understand about this?
Yeah, I don't. Every once in a while, I'm sure they will find someone who claims that they were wrongfully kicked off of Medicaid, and everyone will take their side until we find out that they were actually a criminal gang member that was beating their wife, and and doing some human trafficking here and there, and they were on Medicaid.
Right. Yeah. So.
Right.
That's what's on our minds. But this show is supposed to be Steve and Bob Get Personal. So
Yeah, because we thought about we do so
will
much
go on
media
to a
schmedia.
tangent.
We've gone crazy on the media schmedia stuff, and we
Right.
forget about that we're human beings, Bob.
We are
we're
human
people,
beings. Yes,
and our
and our
fans
fans love
care about
Yes.
us. Yeah.
So let me first go. Let me just quickly tell you that we have company. So my best girl's sister is here, and her husband and their daughter. Yeah, my best girl's
like them?
family. I do like them. They're cool.
Or are you just saying that because we're on a
Well,
podcast?
yeah, like what am I going to say on the podcast that
No,
I think
I
they're
don't like
jerks? I mean, like seriously, I happen to actually like these ones. She has some. Actually, I like all of her relatives. So let me tell you real quick about her family. So she has a huge family. It's a blended family, but they've blended when they were very young children. So essentially, it's all one family. There's 6 daughters and a son. All right. So out of the 6 daughters, 4 of them are conservative, and the one that's here is a conservative. One of the 4 conservatives is like the most radical pro-Trump. Like, she's one of the people that if you say something
She's
insulting,
like you.
She's much beyond me. If
Oh,
you say something,
there is beyond you?
there's beyond me.
Oh.
If you insult Trump, like, she legitimately becomes upset. Like, she will get actually upset if you insult Trump, even though she obviously does not know Donald Trump. So that sister, and then there's the other 2 sisters are liberals. One of them is like pretty far crazy left liberal. So that liberal sister and the Trump conservative sister have had such like screaming fights. And this is long before, this is ever since Trump came on the scene, before I came into the picture. I've been told that they had such heated fights, like screaming fights.
So they're both there?
No,
staying
they're
with
not
you?
both here.
Oh, okay.
Neither one of them is here. It's a different sister that's here.
Got
But
it.
what I'm getting to a roundabout way is that they got so heated with their pro-Trump, anti-Trump rhetoric at family events that my best girl's mother, who's a wonderful woman, she's not super old. I doubt she's even, maybe she's 70 at the most, but she's super active, totally cool. She actually had to issue like a rule that there are no politics allowed at all. So family events, we have to be super
That's
careful.
not a bad policy.
It's not a bad rule because really when you do have a split family, and the people are very passionate. It's going to
I
get
thought it was
pretty crazy.
blended. They didn't blend. They didn't quite
Did
blend.
not
The
blend
politics
those-
doesn't
no.
blend in the blended
Apparently,
family?
the politics are like oil and water, and they
You
don't
leave it at
blend
the door.
together. So
Yeah.
anyway, the one
we
sister
have
who's
company
here
too this
is a
weekend.
conservative. So that's great.
So
and
that's
they're
good for
totally
you.
on board. They are fans of the B&B. They've been watching the B&B. In fact,
They are chosen few.
They are. And the
They are
husband,
among the chosen few.
At one point, I said something, and I referenced my best girl's name, and he actually said, "You mean your best girl?" So he's actually even quoting from the B&B.
Right.
So that shows that
Good.
he's like
Yeah,
a
but
real...
you're still a thief. You stole that from Matt
I stole
Walsh.
that from Chris Plant. Yeah, Chris
Oh,
Plant.
from Chris Plant.
Yeah,
Sorry.
but I think if you openly admit that you stole it from another guy,
Yeah.
doesn't that make it a
yeah,
little
it's
bit better?
it's a compliment.
Yeah. So anyway,
The
All right,
greatest
so who's
form
your
of
company?
the greatest compliment is, or the greatest form of flattery is
imitation is the best form of flattery.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, we have company too. So we
Nice.
have a house full of guests this weekend. So one of my stepdaughters, her husband, their family came to Minnesota for the first time, and in
nice.
fact, one of the people that's coming isn't coming till later today because this person had to anchor one of the network morning shows this morning, and they're
Really?
flying in this afternoon to hang out.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'll leave it at
Nice.
that.
So we would
don't
know
wanna-
this person
I don't
if
want to
you were-
tell people who I associate with, but he's
interesting.
he's an anchor, one of the anchors for one of the
Nice.
network
Look at
morning
that.
shows. So he
Well-
did the morning show this morning, pulled the 4th of July shift, and is hopping on a plane, and is going to come and join us. We're going to have fireworks. We blasted fireworks last night. So in Minnesota, you have to go to Wisconsin for two things. One is beer. So you have to go.
What?
Yes, this beer
They
called
don't sell
Spotted
beer in
Cow.
Minnesota?
They do, but they don't sell Spotted Cow in Minnesota.
Oh.
Spotted
Is
Cow
that a brand of beer?
It's a beer
Okay.
that you can only get in Wisconsin.
Nice.
So it's kind of like Coors. It's kind of like Eastbound and Down, Smokey and the
okay.
Bandit. You have to
Right,
go
right.
across the border and bring your beer back. And
Wow.
also fireworks.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
that's the state you go to for fireworks. So I went and got a bunch of beer and a bunch of fireworks, and we drank beer and shot off fireworks last night.
Nice.
And I
Yeah,
feel
we're
pretty
going.
good. I feel pretty good today
Yeah,
because
I
we
feel
have to
American.
keep going.
Right.
I feel
Tonight
America.
we're going to see fireworks. I worked yesterday, so I was in bed last night. I did not go to the fireworks last night. Tonight we're going to the fireworks. So we're doing a hike today and then fireworks tonight. And of course a cookout. All the great things that Americans do. On this show, we can say that's what makes America great. Unlike Rebecca Lobo, we do not get embarrassed when we say that's what makes America great.
Oh, I say it
because-
all the time, and I stick to it. There's
That
no
is-
awkward silence.
I always ask people, first of all, I like to ask liberals, is this country great? And of course, usually they say no. We just had that survey. But I always ask them, well, which country is better? And they'll give some Norwegian country that's 1/10 the size of the U.S.
Right.
They really have no answer. They just love to whine about everything. They love.
I like when these maps show up. I don't know if you have this on TikTok or on X, but
What?
I always look at I'm curious about the maps.
Right.
How many
What kind of
pickup
map?
trucks per state,
Oh,
and just
yeah.
weird things like that. And one of them was
I know exactly
the
what you mean,
largest
yeah.
economies in the world, and the largest economy in the world is like the top 8 states of the United States,
Right.
and then it's China, then it's
Okay.
the next 13 states in the United
Right.
States, then it's like the next 10 states after that, and then
Right.
finally it gets to Germany.
Right.
So
Huh.
the United States, you could split it up 3 or 4 ways, and you would
Yeah.
have like the top 5 economies
Right.
in the United States.
I
And
wonder
also,
if you-
there was another one that was population of Canada. So
Okay.
California and Canada are about the same, and
Right.
the Northeast are about the same, and then Texas and the Midwest. So we're population wise, we are Canada 6 times over.
Right. I
So-
saw something like 90% of Canadians live within 50 miles of the U.S. border. Like everyone in Canada is just right along basically the U.S.
Right.
border.
Yeah. So if you draw a line across, the top from Washington all the way over to Lake Superior, right?
Right.
And you use that longitude.
Right.
80% of Canada lives below that longitude in
Which
that area of Canada that kind of sticks down.
It's like a strip, basically.
Yeah.
It's not very much.
Like Canada has so much land, but nobody lives in that land.
Right.
But you know what? Global warming, they'll flourish because they'll have, everybody can just move north in Canada. And
my aunt got mad at me because I said global, like the last episode when I said if apparently if liberals hate us so much that if we just say climate change, that's it. If I just go, oh, Steve, I wanted to talk about climate change today. That what you're making fun. You think it's fake. You're making fun of climate change. Like
it's
no,
not.
I just said
the climate has changed throughout the entire history of the planet. The climate has changed dramatically.
Yes, it's called the weather.
And
we have
and we can survive with about, I mean, I'm guessing comfortably about 120 or so degrees. So like it's really uncomfortable when you get to 110, and then it's really uncomfortable when you get to 20 below.
Right.
But in that 130 degree range, we're all right. So even if it does change by a few degrees,
right.
Of course, then there's the sea level rising argument, which I lived in Florida all of my adult life, and there's only like one area, which is out on Hutchinson Island down by Fort Pierce, where there's actually a road that you can go to on South Hutchinson Island in Florida. And there is a road that used to jut out into the Atlantic Ocean, and there were some stores and a couple of restaurants there. And years ago, like 20 years, 30 years ago, it kind of washed away, and they finally just said, let it go, and they stopped rebuilding out that far. But I mean, that's the only place in Florida where the sea has actually overtaken any part of Florida.
Yeah. No, I think
in my whole lifetime.
Right. I think that the sea level is basically the same. I mean, we're not going to get super political today, but it's clearly climate is measured in like 100,000 year blocks. Like we only have statistics going back to the last 150 years. So how do we know that in this 100,000 year block that we are in right now, that started 989,000 years ago, how do we know that we are not much colder than the previous 100,000 year block?
Yeah, when we didn't have thermometers.
We don't have any.
What do we know about prior to the invention? Of course, then you go to trees. Then people say, "Oh, well, we can tell from geology."
Right.
The trees and the. By the way, one of the other people, as long as we're talking about people that are visiting, one of the other people visiting, as I told you, works at Spotify.
Yes, what's up with
that? So I talked to her, and I said, what's the best way to promote a podcast? And she said, do you know anybody famous?
Okay.
I said, yeah, I know a few people, but I haven't asked them on the podcast yet because we didn't have it quite the way I wanted it. But now it's a good enough product that I'm happy to reach out to some of these folks and invite them on the show. So, Bob, apparently that's one of the big things is to get somebody else who has a better podcast than yours to come on your podcast.
We could find that. Could we get Joe Rogan, you think? Let's call him up.
I'm going to call Joe. I'm going to call Joe tomorrow. I know he's busy today, but I'm going to give him a ring tomorrow. We'll see if we can get Rogan on the podcast. Yeah.
Why don't we try that? I mean, what's the worst that can happen?
And then you reach out to Donald Trump.
I will.
And see if he'll come on the podcast. You know, it'd be funny. Maybe we should just reach out to Caroline Levitt and say, hey, is there any chance that the Barrett and Baxa podcast could just have the president just for a little while? Because I want to ask him about the night that I broke into his house. Didn't break it. Talked my way into his house and went to his party. Because that would be a fun thing to talk about with him.
Yeah, maybe that's
because he would say, wait a second, I remember you sitting at the door until the last minute and you wouldn't leave.
Right.
And I'd say, well, that's me.
We should try to see if we can get Donald Trump. That would be good.
Yeah, and we know so many people in the media. Well, what we were going to talk about, I think, if I remember correctly, is our journey in journalism.
To Channel 9. Yeah.
Yeah, how we ended up there. And I know that we both
met, obviously, you and I met at Channel 9, WFTV in Orlando,
we were on the same morning show.
And we were. And I was there first. Actually, why don't you let me tell how I first became aware of the existence of Steve Barrett.
How did you first become aware of the existence of Steve Barrett? It's a funny story.
So we have a mutual friend named Roger, our great friend Roger Benedict, and I hung out.
The
He had a
Raj.
dog named Marissa. I had a dog named Matt. And Matt and Marissa were great friends. They were best friends. And I would go over to Roger's house. The dogs would spend hours wrestling and chasing each other and all kinds of stuff. So he told me that there was a new reporter that had been hired. And I think he just offhandedly said, "Oh yeah, they hired a new reporter. I think I'm supposed to be working with them next week." And it was like an offhanded comment. I was like, "Okay, great." It wasn't the kind of thing that I would care about.
Reporters come and go.
Reporters come and go. I was like, all right, cool. So then it's like 3 days later, and I'm back at Roger's house, and Roger's like, "You're not going to believe this." So remember I told you about that new reporter? I was like, yeah. He's like, "Dude, he's in the hospital. Like, he's severely injured." And I was like, what? What happened? He's like, "I don't know. He apparently got hurt, like doing something." And I was like, dude, how crazy is the fact that right now I glanced over to my phone, and guess who is texting me as I tell this story? Bob Jordan.
Oh,
Bob Jordan is texting me.
Happy 4th. Text Bob back, and I'll tell you real quick about that story of how I was injured. While you text back, tell him Steve says hi, and we're recording an episode right now as we text. Bob Jordan's going to have to be one of the early guests that we bring on. Speaking of famous people,
Bob, we are literally recording an episode of our podcast right now as we speak. We think it's so cool that you texted me while we are recording. Steve says hi, and we both wish you happy 4th of July.
That's a nice one to go to Bob. And Bob, it's funny because Bob.
It's so funny that he would text
Bob was
me
the
right
first
now.
person to come and visit me in the hospital. So what happened?
So tell what happened.
Long story
how did you
short.
get injured?
Okay,
because it's a good story.
Yeah, it's a good story.
It doesn't make you look like a very smart person. I'm sorry to have to be the one.
But first, you've
to
got to understand. Okay, I grew up in Sauk County, Wisconsin, and there's a place called Devil's Lake in Sauk County, and the Devil's Lake on the one side is just sheer rock formations, and you can rock climb. You can climb up the walls, and we would take a 12-pack of beer, and we would climb to the top of Devil's Lake, free climbing. I mean, we're talking just clawing our way to the top, right? So I spent my whole teenage years free climbing all over this crazy
right. So you're a rock climbing guy.
So I'm a rock climbing guy. So I'm at a mall, and this mall has one of those rock climbing walls. You know that you bring it in on a semi-truck, right? You bring it in on a semi-truck, and it stands up like this, right?
Yes.
So I had a couple of drinks, but I mean, I wasn't tanked or anything, but I knew that, I'm going to try and climb this thing. So I went over to climb it. Well, the person that was watching over the rock climbing wall had like gone for coffee or taken a break or something. Okay. So me just kind of, and it's just sitting there. So I said, okay, I'm going to start climbing this. So I climb to the top, right? I make it to the top, and then I'm on my way back down. And my pant leg of my jeans gets caught on one of those, little hooks that you grab. Yes. And it flipped me over, and I lost my grip.
Wait, weren't you jumping down? You went to
I was climbing down. Okay. I was on my way down. And so as I went down with one foot, my pant leg got caught, and it flipped me, and I cartwheeled, and I landed on the trailer that they haul the thing with.
Right.
And a piece of angle iron went through my leg.
Okay.
Another piece of angle iron ripped. In fact, here I've got a scar right here where it ripped my whole chin off, and it filleted my chin off. I broke 4 ribs, and my right wrist was sticking out sideways. It was literally sideways.
So squeamish. Yeah.
So they promptly called me a helicopter. I was loaded up in the air flight helicopter and flown to the rooftop of Orlando Regional Medical Center.
Right.
And landed on it. I went downstairs, and my wife was smart enough to say, hey, we're not just having anyone put his chin back on his face. Wake somebody good up. So this great doctor, Salius Jankowskis was his name. He came and he put the light on, and he's in my face for like 2 hours, sewing my chin back onto my face. Wow. And if you're watching on YouTube, you literally, I have to show you where those scars are. You can see it right there. Just a little bit.
Cut your chin off of your face.
Of my face. My chin was filleted, hanging over here, right? And then the next day they had to go and put my arm back together. So they put my here I am in the hospital. Bob Jordan is the first person to come and see me. He left the morning meeting after finding out what happened to me. And keep in mind, I was brand new to Channel 9, but I was well known to Bob Jordan. So this was the third television station Bob had brought me to. So I'd been working for Bob for a long time. So Bob knew me. He knew I was kind of a risk taker, and that's kind of what he hired me for, is that I was the guy that, was willing to walk into gangland and question them about, well, what happened? There was a drive-by shooting. What's going on? Are you guys feuding with the other gang over here? And they'd be like, oh, it's Steve Barrett. I'll talk to him. So, and I'd go to hurricanes and things like that. But that's funny that's how you first came to know me.
So, of course, and of course, then the news got out that you had fallen off a rock climbing wall. And I had never met you. You're just some guy coming to work at the station. And, of course, in my mind, I'm like, wow, this guy's kind of a douchebag. Like, he gets hurt severely before he even gets to our station. Like, that's kind of bad.
Well, I'd been there a week or two. I'd been there.
But I had never met you. And so that was my first time becoming aware of you. And then I think I'm trying to. Do you remember the first time we physically met? Because I do not. It had to be somewhere, maybe at the station, or Roger might have taken me to your house with him.
Yeah,
it's
that may have been
through Roger.
Yeah, it may have been. It may have been something with Roger, or maybe an event. Because back then, newsrooms were tight, and I don't know how much they are now. But I mean, a newsroom was like a high school class. It was like you would go to a newsroom, and a lot of the people would be there on like 3 to 5 year contracts. So you had like an expiration date, and then you were going to move on to another television station or something like that. In fact, here in Minneapolis, I know multiple people working at certain newsrooms here that I worked with at other newsrooms. Nice. you always run into the same people. But so
we hung out together our group of people was together every weekend in Orlando.
And we were tight. Everybody knew everybody else. Totally. We had a very good time. I like to have a lot of parties, so that was always fun.
There were many parties at your house. I think we've already told the fans that I dressed as you for Halloween.
How did you first end up like in front of a microphone?
Well, it's good. I moved to Florida when I was 29 years old. I was living in New Jersey, and I was working as a car salesman. And that year, so we're talking 1995, there were like 4 massive blizzards, and every time it blizzarded, if that's a word, the car salesman in your suit and like your overcoat, we had to go to the lot and clean the snow off of 100 cars out in the lot. And it was horrible. And by the 4th one, I was like, I'm getting out of New Jersey. My cousin was living in Fort Lauderdale. He said, dude, come down here. I got a spare bedroom. I won't charge you rent. You live with me until you find a job. At some point you could just live and pay me rent, whatever. Mm-hmm. It was like I had a good deal. So one day I packed up the car, moved to Florida, moved in with him. It went exactly as he said it would go. I started bartending. One day I'm listening to 94.9 Zeta, and a commercial for the Connecticut School of Broadcasting comes on the radio. And it just like set off a light.
Connecticut School of Broadcasting.
And I was
it was a big deal back then.
Totally. Yeah. And they were just opening a brand new campus in Davie, Florida. And so they were heavily promoting it. And I was like, wow, I've always wanted to be in broadcasting. Maybe I could go to that school. So make a long story short, I went down there. I auditioned. Of course, the audition is, do you have money to give to us? Shockingly, we have a spot for you. You're just good enough
and
to
they
get
love
into
your
our
voice. Your voice is fantastic.
You're perfect for our school as long as you give us money. So, but they did call it an audition. I'm pretty sure that no one got turned away. But I knew from the minute I started, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I loved it. It was awesome. I still remember.
It's easy. You sit here and talk.
It's it. This is the whole thing. And I can remember being at the school in Davie, Florida, sitting in a really professional studio that, of course, was connected to nothing. It wasn't connected to anything. It was just a studio.
Just nothing.
And being
going
nervous.
Nowhere.
Dude, I was so totally nervous. The only people that could hear me were the 6 people in the room with me. It was probably like 15 in that class. So it's not like you're on the radio, and yet people would be so nervous just because there's a microphone in front of you. And from there, I graduated that class. I got hired at WSBR in Boca Raton.
Wow.
Tiny little AM radio station.
Straight to the top for you.
Yeah. This, and again, the very first time I was actually on the air, it was on the weekend on WSBR. I was a board operator.
Were you nervous?
So nervous. And they would let the board operator read like a little weather report. And so I wrote my weather report and I had it all written out. And, there was a sounder. I was playing the sounders and all the various elements of the show were being played by me on a computer screen. And then it would come time where you turn on your mic and you do your little weather. And that was like my very first time on the air. And, oh, my God, I loved it so much. And then I got a promotion.
How long did it take for you to kind of get used to it and you were just like...
I feel like I got pretty good at that part. I was just on the weekends. I was the weekend board operator. I worked like 3 hours on Saturday, 3 hours on Sunday morning, and then I was bartending in Fort Lauderdale to make money. And then along came an opportunity to move up to the daytime morning drive board operator.
Ooh,
and within the station, this was
like a huge promotion.
Huge. Because now, instead of 14 listeners, now there's like maybe 175 listeners. I mean, it could be hundreds of people listening in the morning. You never know. So they gave me that job. And one of the things that I had to do on that morning show board operator job was the traffic reporter from Metro Traffic would call in, and I would record her little traffic, and then I would play it back like 2 or 3 minutes later. And at one point I said to her, hey, how do you become a traffic reporter? And she gave me a guy's name in Miami to go see. I still remember his name is Chris Leonard. He's the guy who hired me. And now, knowing what I knew later.
Shout out to Chris Leonard.
Yeah, shout out to Chris. I made a tape. At one of the great things about the Connecticut School of Broadcasting is that you could use their facilities. So I made a tape. I made a traffic tape, and I drove it down. I was living in Fort Lauderdale. I drove it down to Miami. I gave it to them. I found out later after I got hired that they had thousands upon thousands, boxes overflowing on the floor. And if you think about it, every single tape, these were in the days of cassette tapes. Every cassette tape that was overflowing on the floor, that was some guy's dream, like his lifetime dream was laying on the floor collecting dust. And how my tape got played, I have no idea. Somehow my tape got played, and they called me up and hired me in Miami. So, and that's how I became a radio traffic reporter in Miami. So,
wow.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, so now, and we'll come back to me. Let's stop with me stop with me on the radio. I'm now on the radio in Miami.
So you made it to the radio through Connecticut.
Made it to the radio in Miami as a traffic reporter. So now, let's start with you. How did you went to college for broadcasting, right?
Yeah, so when I was in high school and middle school and stuff, I read all of S.E. Hinton's books, which are The Outsiders and Rumble Fish. And that was Then, This Is Now. So I read all of these books, and then The Outsiders was made into a movie. And I thought, great movie. This is it. First I wanted to write novels. Then I thought, well, let's just skip straight to the movie. I want to write screenplays. Nice. So I graduate from high school, and I go to the University of Wisconsin Baraboo, which is just a 2-year campus. It's called Boo U. And my girlfriend was a cheerleader at the University of Wisconsin in Stevens Point. She was a football cheerleader. And so I'd go up to visit her, and all the guys were all over her, and they were all older. Like, she's a freshman on the varsity cheerleading squad. And I'm showing up, and all the senior football players are hitting on her and everything. So I said to myself, well, I better get here quick. So I transferred to this school, and one of the reasons was not just her, but also they had a broadcasting department, right? So I get there, and first day of class, I walk in, and I sit down next to the cutest girl in class, even though I had a girlfriend, and I start talking to her, and that turns out to be my wife. Many, many years later. So I met the first day of school.
Wasn't that your best
met
girl?
My wife. Yes.
Right.
So I was disappointed though, because they had a radio station of their own, broadcasting live. It was a huge radio station. They had a big newspaper of their own, and then they had the TV department was more like an AV club.
Okay.
And I was very disappointed. But the TV station had a like their own cable channel if they wanted to use it, but it was just like one of those old message boards. Right. So immediately I said to the people in the AV club, I said, why does the radio station broadcast and have a live broadcast? Why does the newspaper print a newspaper every week? And we're down here at the other end of the hall in this tiny little office. I mean, the office was like as big as this room that I'm in here, right? And so they said, well, you know, we don't have the money. I said, well, why don't we have the money? They said, well, you'd have to go to student government. And I said, well, let's go to student government. So I go to student government, and I said, we made this presentation. We said, look, we want a classroom to turn into a TV studio. We want the money to build a TV studio. So we need cameras, we need switchers, we need monitors, we need everything that we need. And we want to start covering the football games and the basketball games and the hockey games and all of this. So nice. We did that. And over the course of a couple of years, we built a really nice studio and a television program that's still there today. And they're still on the cable network. Wow. And so the person that I hired to be our news anchor is my wife. So I hired her, and we were just buddies. We didn't date at all in college.
And it's not a straight line, by the way. It's not a straight line from her being your friend at that moment to her being your wife today. That is not a straight line.
There's a very squiggly line going on here. Yes. But in any case, so then we were also just outside of a small market called Wausau, Wisconsin. And in Wausau, they have the 3 major networks. So I needed some extra money, so I went up to Wausau and I said, I'm in the TV program down at the college. Do you have any openings? And they said, yeah, we need a floor crew. So I started working at 18 years old at a CBS affiliate, running the teleprompter, sweeping the floor, changing light bulbs on studio lights, and running the cameras in the studio. Then I moved into the control room. And I started doing some light directing, and I was an overnight operations engineer, which means you sit there and you run the commercials in between shows and stuff like that. So I did that for a while. Sorry, I got to itch my ear here.
Dude, let me just interject. No one can screw up the life of a big-time anchor more quickly than a teleprompter operator.
I know.
Because the teleprompter person is moving the words that the anchor is reading. And if you're not moving them at the correct spot, the anchor is screwed. And I have seen prompter. I actually know of a situation where the prompter girl fell asleep, and an anchor, who shall remain nameless, got very, very upset.
Well, we had anchors then, so you had the dial. You had the little dial in your hand. Do you remember those? Mm-hmm. Up at the anchor desk?
That's how it...
And a lot of the anchors, wanted to do it themselves for that very reason, because they didn't want to trust someone else keeping the pace, and so they would get good at running the dial themselves, and they would just run the dial. And so then your only job would be, if a story gets dropped, you'd have to run back, rip the piece of tape off the script, because the teleprompter was not in a computer. It was literally a camera.
It was physical.
Pointing at the script, and you would tape all the pieces of paper together, one piece at a time, and it would run through. So if you dropped a story, you'd run back and you'd rip the 2 pages that you were taking out, and then you'd have to move the other ones up and tape it together. So I was doing that.
The way that stuff used to be is
and I'm doing the television station. And then graduation comes along, and I've already got 3.5 years at working at a broadcast television station. And by this time, I had moved to the newsroom, because I realized that the real fun was the news. And you got to leave the television station and take a camera and shoot.
Go out,
go out. You were at murder scenes. There weren't a lot of murders in central Wisconsin at the time, even though we got a couple of good serial killers in the area. But in any case, so I moved to a newsroom. So now, instead of working in the production part of the TV station, I'm now working in the newsroom out in the field as a news photographer. And then I went from there down to West Palm Beach, Florida, and now we're getting a little bit closer to you and I running into each other, because now I've gone from the cold of Wisconsin to the heat of West Palm Beach, and
I'm in Boca, so
that story was where I ended up sneaking into Donald Trump's house into Mar-a-Lago and partying all night.
Now, you didn't work for Bob Jordan in Palm Beach, did you?
No, the first time I did not. So I went to this television station, the NBC affiliate there, which is Channel 5, and I worked for Scripps Howard Broadcasting for a couple of years before going to Tampa. And
we should tell, let me interject. We should tell people, because some people won't know this, that there's TV stations. There are television markets in the United States. And basically, that just means it's the area around the city that gets the broadcast channels in that area. So the number one market is New York. Number two is Los Angeles, then Chicago. Orlando, when we were there, when I started, Orlando was 20. Orlando went to 19, and then I think it went to 18 because Orlando is such a thriving city. What number market is West Palm, like 45?
I've got the list. I think West Palm was 35, yeah.
Okay.
West Palm is currently 39.
Okay.
And
what's
at the
Orlando
time,
right now? I wonder.
Orlando is currently 15, dude.
Well, see, it's going
so
up.
Orlando's bigger than Minneapolis, St. Paul. Yeah, it's gone from 20 up to 15. So I'll just give you the top 20: New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Dallas, Fort Worth, Philadelphia, Houston, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., Boston, San Fran, Tampa, Phoenix, Seattle, Detroit, Orlando, Minneapolis, Denver, Miami. So Orlando is bigger than Miami. Like, a lot of people don't realize this.
No.
Miami is the third largest metropolis in Florida.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks it's the biggest. It is not.
Right. No.
And part of that is because they have nothing to the south. They have West Palm Beach to the north. They have the Everglades to the west and the Atlantic Ocean to the east. So
it just seems like a bigger city, but Orlando is bigger than Miami. The Orlando television market is bigger than the Miami television market.
Yeah. So
that's what
Cleveland is 19, and then Sacramento is 20. So there's your top 20 TV markets.
Cool.
So I'm at market 35 at the time, and I'm working for as a news photographer, running live trucks and doing all that. And that's when I covered my first hurricane, which was Hurricane Andrew. So that would have been 1992. So by 92, I've been in television for like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I was in the Air Force still in 92, so I was not in television.
Well, thanks for your service there, Bob.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
So how do you get from Miami to Orlando then?
Okay, so I'm working as a traffic reporter in Miami, which was such a fun job. I'm making $10 an hour. So
doing radio, I always wanted to do radio because radio is so much fun.
Yeah, it is. And so the way it works when you work at Metro Traffic is like the leader. I don't even know that there even is a competitor. It's pretty much just Metro Traffic, and they own a company called Shadow Traffic. It's all part of the same company. We were owned by Westwood One when I worked for them. And the way it works is they call us traffic anchors, which is kind of a pretentious word, but whatever. Each guy, you would get like 1 or 2 big stations, and then 3 or 4 littler, maybe like an AM, littler stations. And those would be your 4 or 5 stations. And you would, because some stations do traffic every 10 minutes. Other stations do traffic every 15 minutes. Some stations only do twice an hour. So what would happen is that a lot of stations would be doing traffic at the top of the hour. So I would have 2 stations that both needed a traffic report right at the top of the hour. So I would literally take headphones and I would put them I would put another set across my head. And so I had one ear for one headphone and the other ear for the other headphone. So I would, ahead of time, like let's say at 5 minutes to the top of the hour.
So you're not in a helicopter at this point. You're in a studio.
No.
Right?
I'm in a studio. Yeah. So about 5 minutes to the top of the hour, I would record a traffic report on what's called a cart, which is, it's hard to describe.
It's like a video. If you don't, it's like an audio tape.
It's an audio tape. It actually looks like an 8-track if you're an old person and you remember 8-tracks. I would record a traffic report, just whatever was going on right then. I would record that on a cart tape. And I would put that in the cart machine. That would be ready to go. I would be listening to that station on one ear. Then on the other ear, I would go live on my live station. As I'm talking live on my live station, maybe the DJ's talking to me, whatever I'm doing live on the radio, I would hear in my other ear, it's called a sounder. It was the sound that they would do on the air. And on this station, it was like it was like a car horn. And that meant the traffic report was starting. So I'd hear the car horn. Yeah. I would press play on the machine. So I'd be playing my own voice on a tape on that station while I was live on this station.
So now you've got your own voice bouncing around in your head,
Dude,
which is
so
a very difficult thing to do for people who haven't done broadcasting.
I would quickly take that one off and put that headphone down. And then I would just keep the one on where I was live, and I'd finish up my live thing. So I would actually be on 2 different radio stations at the same time. And this happened 10 times an afternoon.
So you're getting good at it, man. You're practicing.
Good.
Because
yes.
I know that like having your own voice echoing in your ear is one of the most difficult things to talk through, and you have to train yourself to not listen to your ears.
Yes,
you have to
horrible.
your ear, you can't, it's not like you can blink and you can close your eyes, right? You can't close your ears, so you just have to let it resonate in your head, and it bounces around in there.
It actually I was on this station called Zeta. It was the rock station.
I remember Zeta.
It was awesome.
It's a huge
94.9 Zeta. I was called Traffic Bob, and I was like a character. Like it was awesome.
You're still a character, Bob.
I would get like recognized in public because I was Traffic Bob. I'd go to station events. It was very fun. I was making $10 an hour. So the DJ got to the point where like we'd be talking and I'd be like, dude, hang on one second. And he'd be like, stop paying attention to the other station and pay attention to me. And he'd be saying this on the air because he knew that I was pressing play on the thing. So he would kind of mess with me. And we made that into like a little bit. It was fun. So anyway, it became my good friend Chuck Henson, who was like the assistant manager in Miami. He became the manager of Metro Traffic in Orlando. So he leaves, and about 3 months later, he says to me, "Hey, there's a TV station in Orlando, WFTV. It's the top. It's a flamethrower, the top station. This place is like big time. It was
dominant,
real television. They are looking up until then." TV stations in the morning had done their traffic report as if it was a radio station. They would just take a traffic reporter's voice and put it on the air, and they would show the camera
or
something. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was the guy who was doing it was just doing a radio traffic report. It just happened to be on TV. So he said to me, look, they're looking to completely overhaul their traffic situation. They want to have a traffic reporter in the studio. Like you're a weatherman. They want you in there with the anchors. Like the anchors are going to be talking to you. You're going to be an integral part of the team. He's like, this is such an awesome opportunity for you. Come to Orlando and audition. Now, this was a real audition.
This was a real, now this you get to the real audition.
Yeah, this was actual auditioning because I wasn't going to be giving them money. They were going to potentially be giving me money. So if they're giving you money, that's a real audition. So I got in my Jeep, and I actually put my suit in the back seat because it's so freaking hot driving, and I had no air conditioning in my Jeep, and I drove in my shorts and T-shirt.
I remember that Jeep.
From Miami to Orlando. When I got close, I pulled over to the side of the road and put my suit on and pulled into the Channel 9 parking lot. And I had to go to, remember Ronnie, that black lady who worked as the receptionist? Ronnie. I had to go see Ronnie in the front, and I said, hi, I'm here to audition, and she had my name and everything, and I was like, wow, I was like just in awe, like, wow, this is a real TV station. And so they take me to the studio. I'm immediately so unbelievably intimidated because I had never been in a TV studio before. I mean, I was a radio guy. Radio guys, you sit in a room and you have a microphone. It's like sitting in this room. It's no different. Now, all of a sudden, here I am in a real TV studio. And Todd Yaros, who still works there to this day, he was the one who kind of got me set up in front of the camera. And the control room said, all right, we're rolling. And I did a traffic report into the camera. I probably did like 10. And I remember I went in. I talked to Bob Jordan. He came across as a very nice guy. He was very friendly and nice to me. And he was like, all right, thank you for coming. I know you drove a long way. This is what we're looking for. From what I hear, I haven't looked at your audition yet, but from what I hear, they tell me you did a perfectly good job. So we have a lot of other people auditioning. He's like, I'm sure you're not surprised to hear that. And I was like, Bob, to be honest, I'm happy that I even had this opportunity just to come here. Like, I would love to get the job, but this is awesome that I even got to come here and do this. Thank you, blah, blah, blah. One of those things. So I get back in my Jeep. I drive back to Miami, go back to being on the radio. And about a week later, Chuck says to me, he's like, "Hey, man, I'm sorry, but they went with They went with a girl, a woman, I should say. I shouldn't call her a girl. They went with this woman who, and from what he's like, I think you were one of the finalists." Which, of course, is what you say to your friend who didn't get the job. You say, "Dude, you were number 2. You were like right
you
there.
Almost got
like,
it.
You were almost there. And you just barely missed it."
So what happened to this woman?
All right. So
did she get hired or?
Yeah, she got hired. Her name, and I wish Jenny Castillo. I still remember this because everyone used to talk about her when I finally got there.
Jenny Castillo.
Apparently, she was Spanish, and apparently she was able to act like she spoke perfect English when she was not nervous. But when she was nervous, her Spanish accent came out really, really bad. And I guess they put her on the air, and within like that first day, from what people told me, that first day, they were like, "Wow, we made a gigantic mistake." And so I'm in Miami, I'm working on the radio, my cell phone rings, I see it's an Orlando number. I answer it. He says, "Bob, this is Bob Jordan. We made a mistake. We should have hired you. Are you still available?" And I was
that's
like,
so Jordan.
Wow, what? And I mean,
he gets
like,
right to the point.
Yeah, I'm getting chills telling this story because I so absolutely remember that phone call. I remember thinking like, wow, I'm going to be on TV. Well, this is unbelievable. And, I had to pack up everything in Miami. I still had my apartment in Miami. They wanted me to, this was like a Thursday. He was like, "Is there any way you could start Monday?" And of course, when you just got hired by Bob Jordan, I'm not going to say, "No, I can't." So I was like, yeah, Monday sounds fine. Of course, I had no apartment. I don't even know like what I'm doing with my apartment I got my dog.
You got a dog?
Yeah. I mean, I can't just pack up and leave,
One
but
suit,
I did it.
a dog, and a Jeep.
Yep, that's what I
you
had.
came to Orlando with.
And I showed up, and the rest is history. I got the job. So the moral for kids listening is that just because they told you no, you don't have the job, that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have the job. Like they literally might call you a week later and say, "We messed up. We should have given the job to you." So there you go. That's what happened to me.
So I had a similar thing. I actually turned down a job from Bob Jordan and then had my second thoughts. So it kind of went in the opposite direction.
Right.
So I'm in West Palm Beach and I'm having a blast as a news photographer because I'm going on like SWAT team raids. I've got a bulletproof vest in my thing. I'm chasing tornadoes and murder scenes and just having this great time. So I go to Tampa. I was supposed to work at Channel 8 and that job evaporated and I ended up at Channel 13, which at the time was the number one CB. I'm a photog.
You're not on air.
I'm not on air.
This was something I always wondered with you is very few photogs ever make it in front of the camera. Like that's
right. And so here's how it happened. So I'm working at Channel 13, which is now the Fox affiliate. At the time, it was the CBS affiliate until the big switch, which happened back in the mid-90s. Right. And so I'm a photog, having a blast doing it. It's absolutely the funnest thing. So I'm on the street, I'm doing special projects in the investigative unit, I'm doing features, all kinds of stuff. And then at one point, we got this new producer, David and Gwen Silverstein. They come from WSVN in Miami, and they're like the edgy producers and everything, right? So we're a Fox affiliate now. We've made the switch. And David, one day, I'm at a police officer has been shot, and I'm the only guy there as a photog. So I run my mast up on my truck, and David calls me and says, "Steve, why don't you just mic yourself and talk to the anchors live on television as a news photographer?" And so,
were you nervous?
So, nervous as hell. So, but they tossed to me. Kelly Ring, I remember, was the anchor. She tosses to me. She says, "Steve Barrett, one of our news photographers, is live at the scene. Steve, what's going on?" And they were loading this police officer up into the helicopter after he's been shot. And I've got the whole thing, and so I'm literally live and I've got my mic, I've got my my microphone stuffed down my pants, right? And so I took it off my camera.
Why couldn't you put a lapel mic on? Did you not have lapel?
I didn't have a lapel mic at the time, so I took my shotgun mic. And the other thing was, I knew that if I needed to interview someone, So I stuffed the shotgun mic in my
You'd have
pants,
to pull it out of your pants.
and I could pull it out of
my.
my pants, and I could interview someone with it. So that's just what I did. It went so well that David said, you know what, Steve, let's just put you in a live truck every night, and you go to whatever the breaking news is. So I started doing that, and I was a reporter that you never saw. And they would just say, photographer Steve Barrett's on the scene, and da-da-da-da-da-da. And they put a little graphic on and said, this is Steve Barrett. So I started doing that, and at the same time, I was doing lots of special projects at the station, too. And so we went to the Society of Professional Journalism Awards, and this year, when the switch happened, Bob Jordan was tasked with building a brand new newsroom. So he's going to build a brand new local newsroom. So this new newsroom goes on the air as an ABC affiliate, Channel 28 in Tampa. And Bob hires a whole staff, all these great reporters and anchors and photogs from all over the country, right?
Okay.
So that year at the Society of Professional Journalism Award, basically Channel 13 took home every single award, and I even won the award for Best Reporter. So the best reporting category, I won it, and I think Bob sat back and went, who is this Steve Barrett guy that keeps walking up and taking every one of these awards? So the next thing I know, I literally get a call from Steve Majors, who's the news director, and Bob Jordan is the station manager at the time, and they brought me in and offered me a job. Well, Channel 13 kind of countered it and told me that they were going to give me a big promotion, and they were going to make me a producer instead of a photographer. And then they went back on that offer, and after I turned the job down with Bob Jordan, and so I called Bob and Steve back and said, is the job still open? And they said, absolutely. When can you start? So then I walked into Phil Metlin. Phil Metlin was the executive producer of America's Most Wanted, and he had been hired as a news director by Fox Television, because now we're in O&O. And I walked into his office and I said, look, you guys aren't making good on your promise. And so he fired me on the spot. He said, turn in all your equipment, give me your truck keys, get out of here. So I left. So I spent a couple of weeks without, not working, and then I went to work for Bob Jordan. And from there, I basically followed Bob again and again and again. And then he went back to West Palm Beach to be the general manager at the station in West Palm Beach. I called him up. I said, hey, how about if I come over there as a reporter? Instead of a producer or a photog, I'll be a reporter. And he said, absolutely, come on. And he made me a reporter for the first time. And so now I'm finally in front of the camera. And I'm like 31 years old or something like this. And from then on, I remained with Bob. So I went from one station. I went from Channel 28 in Tampa. Then I went with Bob to Channel 5, back to the same Channel 5 I'd been working for before in West Palm Beach, Scripps Howard. And then Bob went to Orlando, which is where he hired you. And then right after he hired you to be the traffic reporter, he brought me from West Palm Beach because my contract in West Palm Beach was up. So then we ended up working together.
And that's a common thing in the TV world is news directors taking people with them.
Yeah,
and coming in and firing people and bringing in all their own people.
Here's a funny story. So I had been a photog in West Palm Beach, and I was trying to get jobs either in Orlando or Tampa, right? Because you always want to go up in market. You want to get to a bigger market. So I sent resume tapes, right? And so I would send these resume tapes on 3/4-inch tape at the time. And when remember when we destroyed the newsroom at Channel 9 and we built the brand new newsroom?
Yes, I was there, of course.
We're clearing out desks, and there's all kinds of tapes. And under Gary Singer, who had been the chief photographer, I find my resume tape covered in dust under his desk as we're cleaning up. And it was my resume tape from like 10 years ago, 10 or 12 years ago. That's how long.
We got to play that on the B&B.
I know. We should play that resume tape.
I
wonder what the stories are.
My audition tape from Channel 9, oh my God, I would give any amount of money to see that. Or even much better, what would really be funny is like my first day on the air at Channel 9, I was very confident with my voice, and because I had been on the radio, I had done thousands of reports, but I had never been on TV. I'd never been in front of a camera. And from what I understand, they actually had a meeting about me. They were like, all right, he's very nervous. The second we get him off camera, he's perfect. So it's not that he can't do it. It's just that he's very nervous on camera. Yeah. So we just got to he'll be all right once he comes around, apparently. And obviously I was, but I would love to see my tape from those first couple of weeks at Channel 9. Oh my God, that we could have so much fun with.
You know, it goes.
Maybe somebody has it. If you have it out there, I will pay money for that.
It's funny because it always goes back to Jordan's stories with us. So I've got one. So after I was on air, I noticed like I would do weird things. Like I would sit there and I'd kind of nervously bounce. So you'd see me on camera and I'd be going like this. And so I had to make myself stop that. And then I had an eye twitch. I would be going like this, and then I had to like learn.
I also had a twitch.
Right?
Yes, there's a lot of things.
So you work out these quirks, and I once went and sat down with Bob, and I said, Bob, you know, because Bob had been an anchor forever before he was a news manager, right?
Right.
I said, you know, every time I go on air, I get these butterflies in my stomach, and I get nervous. And I said, how long does it take for that to go away? And Bob said, you better hope it never goes away, because that's what makes you do a good job. Every time you go on air, you should be a little bit nervous, and you should be afraid of fucking it up.
That is bullshit, because it does go away.
It does go away.
To the point,
I don't.
I got to the point
but I think
where,
he was telling me that, like, he was basically saying, use that.
I know what he's saying.
Take that in and use it as, you know, to make you a better reporter.
To the point. In fact, we used to joke about this. We said that we could be awakened out of a sound sleep with a camera in our face, and both of us could wake up. And I know this is true. In those days, you could have woken me up out of a sound sleep, and I could have grabbed a mic and given you a perfectly legible or, you know, perfectly airable traffic report right out of a sound sleep, and you could have done the same thing.
Well, you did it to me. Remember, you had to wake me up in the studio that one time.
That is true. You fell asleep in the studio.
I've had times where I'm like, I used to have to set my watch because you doze off in a live truck. You know, you're at a murder scene, and
I know.
Police all around and lights and everything, and you'd just be so exhausted, you'd just nod off. And so I'd have my thing, and my alarm, it would go off. I would give myself 60 seconds before I had to be on air, because I had to have time to climb out of the truck, get my IFB into my ear, grab my microphone, turn on the lights, and then I'm ready to be live. And I would have 60 seconds, and sometimes if I nodded off, my alarm on my phone would go off, and I was like, 60 seconds, I'm live. And I'd put my IFB in, and I could hear the beginning of the show, you know, and I was usually the top story. So you'd hear the intro to the show, and then the anchors, and you'd step in front of the camera. And sometimes I stepped in front of the camera 10 seconds before that.
I'm well aware.
The directors hated it.
Right.
Because they wanted you to stand there for 5 minutes before. They wanted you to be there for 5 minutes, just standing there with your mic in your hand.
So they could look at you. But everyone needs to do that, man. Yeah, so many times Denise Darrow would say, Bob, and then I would run over to my spot, and Brian would literally be tossing to me as I was running over, because I was not paying attention at my little desk, and I would come sliding in and boom, do a traffic report.
TV was so much fun back then.
Yeah, we did have a great time.
So much fun.
So, all right, why don't we? I think that's probably a good amount for
It's
today.
An hour.
Huh?
That's an hour of our time on our 4th of July, but we both have guests in our houses.
We do,
and we have to get back to it.
All right.
All right, Bobby B. Happy No King's Day.
Yes, sir. We'll talk soon.
All right.